Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from A Man Talks NRL SuperCoach. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. If you guys saw in the preseason, I did a video going through the best draw for teams from rounds 1 to 6. Now that we've finished round 6, I thought it'd make sense to go from rounds 7 to 12. And I think it was also a good opportunity to start talking about potential bye planning and potentially players to target that will play in round 13 in the first bye week, and also would be useful over the State of Origin period. So guys, if you do like this video, would really appreciate a thumbs up on it, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. But enough of that, let's get into it. So what I've put together here are every team's draw from round 7 to 12, and I've kind of done my best to mark up the difficulty of some of these teams. Again, this is all subjective. Everyone might have their own opinion as to what kind of difficulty they'll rate a team, but in my view, these are the teams that I think have got the best draw. The Dragons, the Eels, Panthers, Roosters, Storm, Titans, Warriors, and the Tigers. I think they've all got pretty good run of games coming up, and they don't verse too many difficult opponents. I've got some teams here that are flagged as pretty difficult. So the Broncos, Bulldogs, Rabbitohs, and Sharks, I think have got pretty tough fixtures coming up. And kind of middle of the ground, I'd say, are the Cowboys, the Knights, the Raiders, and the Sea Eagles, where they kind of have half and half pretty good, but also some tough games thrown in there as well. Obviously, the next most important thing that we'll have to be looking at are the players, obviously, but also looking at potentially the round 13 buys. I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. So what I thought I'd do is, after showing some of these teams in their draw and the ones that I think are the best, we'll kind of go through some good player options. So what I've tried to do here is put together a list of players that I think are going to be pretty good pickups over the next month and a half, given that their teams have got pretty good draws coming up. What I have also tried to do is flag in yellow the players that I think might potentially be up for Origin, so that is something to consider. There is still quite a long time, obviously, to State of Origin, but I think, if you're really focused on your overall ranking and you can save trades to bring in guys who will play the round 13 bye but also not play in Origin, that is very favourable. So potentially, if you're looking at a tiebreaker between two players and you really can't split the hairs, one way you might be able to go is choose a guy who's going to play in round 13. Is maybe not going to play State of Origin, because they'll give you, an extra player to field over that period where a lot of players will be away on state duty. With the Dragons, I've got Zach Lomax and Paul Vaughan. More focused probably on, say, Zach Lomax. I think obviously I spoke about him quite a bit on the channel. I think I'm really impressed with his stats, and he's got that goal kicking benefit, so his scores are really quite good. Even in games, for example, in the last round, he scored, I think, 58 or 62, and he didn't really get that much ball. So he's posted really good stats, and he's got a good base. I think he made like 30 tackles on the weekend. Paul Vaughan, I kind of put there as a bit of a flyer, potentially, if you're looking to bolster in your front row forward. With the Eels, there are quite a few relevant guys here. Your Ryan Madison, Junior Paulo, Nathan Brown, Dylan Brown in your 5'8", Clint Gutherson, Blake Ferguson, and Isaiah Papali'i, who has been absolutely killing it over the last few weeks. I think these are all guys who, if you are currently having in your team, potentially could be worth holding if you are looking to trade out. Like, for example, Junior Paulo, he's had a few dud scores, but you might want to reconsider with this easy draw coming up. He might potentially benefit from some attacking stats. Dylan Brown, who was someone I had in the team from the start of the season, but I recently just got rid of. Wasn't happy to get rid of him, but he had that suspension, but good draw coming up for the Eels, so he could potentially add some attacking stats, because so far he hasn't really posted that many, and he's really getting his scores from base. Gutherson, we know that what he can do. He always looks heavily involved and is always very likely to get attacking stats. And Blake Ferguson, if you're holding him, definitely looks still to be a good hold. And Isaiah Papali'i, I will touch on him a little bit more in my trade video when I go a little bit more in depth into front row forwards, but he's looking potentially like he could even get more attacking stats with that good draw coming up for the Eels. On the Panther side, they're chock full of relevant players. I don't have to really talk too much about Cleary, Jerome Luai, or Brian To'o. I think everyone knows now their kind of pedigree. Brian To'o, especially in centre wing, and Cleary just the standout halfback. Jerome Luai could be a very good pickup at 5'8". I'm very happy that I brought him into the team last week, and the Panthers benefit from a very good draw coming up. Other guys, like a Charlie Staines, who hasn't really set the world alight, but these easy games, look, so far we haven't seen him do too well in these easy games because he doesn't really have the base, but we might see him benefit without Momirovski, because Momirovski is looking to be suspended, so potentially he might have a centre who passes in the ball a little bit more often. He might get a few more attacking stats. Other guys I've got here like Kurt Capewell, Matt Burton, Api Coruscant if he does come back, and James Fisher-Harris, all very relevant players to have. Maybe the forwards less so with the easy draw coming up. Probably someone else that I could consider is also Dylan Edwards, but he's currently out injured, so I hadn't got him on the list. But if he does come back, he'll come back in the middle of this good run for the Panthers. On the Roosters side, very, very interesting with them, given that they haven't really they haven't really seemed to have been doing so well over the last few weeks, and I think that injury to Luke Keary really is hurting them at the moment. But, the Roosters I still have faith in my boys. I think that they can still turn it around. So obviously your James Tedesco's, your Angus Crichtons, Daniel Tupous, Lachlan Lamb, Takiaho pending his injury, Sam Walker, Brett Morris, Joey Manu. Just a few names that I've wanted listed here, which is kind of half the team essentially. But, I think with this decent draw coming up for the Roosters, they can still do really well. And that might be something to factor in as well if you are thinking about potentially moving off Teddy. I know it's very tempting given that he's scored pretty low recently and he's got a very high break even. And there's a lot of other fullbacks who are firing at the moment, but that's definitely something I want to be considering. Is some of these fullbacks don't have an ideal draw. Clint Gutherson definitely does, so he's someone to consider. Someone like Ponga doesn't have a great draw, but we'll come on to that in a little bit. With the Storm, again, pretty decent draw, but I feel like with the Storm, it's less dependent because they're one of the best teams in the comp, so anyone to them can be considered easy opposition to an extent. But, your Harry Grant, Cam Munster, Pappenhausen, Christian Welch, all guys have been doing pretty well to begin the season. Harry Grant especially catches the eye with this easy draw coming up for the Storm. He just gets attacking stats for fun. So definitely if you can jump the gun and get him into your team, that could be really, really beneficial for you. The problem with the Storm, I guess, is that a lot of these guys will play Origin, so that does negate potentially their benefit because, over that period they might miss some games, but there's still a long time up until the Origin period to make a lot of points. A few other guys who I've got here, like Brandon Smith, I think less relevant now given the return of Harry Grant, but, your Josh Adokar, your Justin Olam, if you're really looking to take a punt, Josh Adokar, he can rack up the tries in these easy games, and Justin Olam is posting some decent base stats, and he has posted some good scores to begin the season. On the Titans side, they have got a good draw coming up, and I would still try to focus on that decent draw coming up, even though they haven't done that well. In the last round against Manly, they got absolutely pumped, but it's still a new team, and they're still trying to figure out their combinations and stuff. So Dave Fifita, obviously, he's still a very, very good buy. He scored 78 when his team basically did nothing. Tino, I've got on the list here, but he's going to be out for 2 weeks, so I think he still will be heavily sold. But if you want to buy him back discounted after his suspension, you could potentially profit with these decent games coming up for the Titans. Brian Kelly, Tyron Peachy, and Corey Thompson are three kind of key centre wing players that I discussed last week, and I still think that they'll benefit really well with these easier games coming up for the Titans. For the Warriors, very interesting, I think, probably don't have that much investment, and I think most people who do have Warriors players, they probably really only have, like, in the forwards, like your Tohu Harris's. Some people might be looking to buy Josh Curran, given that he's posted a massive score, and he's 203k, but it might be worthwhile looking at some of their attacking players. So, your Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. If you really want to go pod, you can go like an Adam Pompey in the centre wings. For Satua, I know he hasn't done that well, but hopefully he can go over the line for some tries when he comes back from his injury. And Jazz Tavanga, potentially if he gets higher minutes, he always looks threatening, and he offloads quite a bit. So against kind of weaker opposition, you might potentially see more points from him over this period of time. And finally, with the Tigers, definitely a team I'm looking at very heavily. I think the Tigers have shown good ability to score points. The defensively they concede a lot of points, but I still think they've got some pretty good attacking weapons in their side. David Nofaluma is top of my list. I really think, pending on kind of what the injuries are for some of my players and suspensions, etc., he could be a very big trading target for me this week. And I think he'll be definitely a pod centre wing, so I'm really hoping I can capitalise with some big scores from him in these easier games. Dane Laurie obviously will be a continuous hold for me at the moment. He hasn't put a foot wrong. I don't see any reason to trade him out. Sean Bloor, potentially when he comes back from injury, wouldn't really consider him essential for the easier games because he's just a forward really, but you might see some attacking stats. I've got Joao Fingawi because he's posted a big score last week, but kind of regressed just this most recent round. Adam Dewey, Stefano, and Luciano Leilua, I've kind of kept all here. I think Adam Dewey is a real big pod 5'8". Luciano Leilua, more so for his attacking threat, and Stefano, he's getting good minutes, so I still think he's a decent cash cow hold over this period of time. So I'll move on now to the players who I think have a more iffy draw. It's a bit up and down. So the Cowboys do have a few tough games thrown in with some easier games, so you could potentially look at someone like a Val Holmes, maybe Jason Tamalolo when he comes back, but again, I don't really think he's going to benefit greatly from attacking stats. I've got Ben Condon here, but I really think if you hadn't bought him last week, he's made a bunch of cash already, and he's got a very low break even, so he's still going to go up quite a bit in value. So you could potentially bring him in this week, but you kind of did miss a big cash rise just this last round. On the Knights side, again, David Klemmer, Dan Safidi, and Kalen Ponga, all very key players who I think a lot of people might be interested in, Ponga especially. But you got other guys like your Bradman Best, Connor Watson, Mitch Barnett, Jane Braley, all very relevant guys. The thing with the Knights of draw is that their first kind of 3 games of this 6-game spell are pretty tough, but after that it does open up very nicely. So if you are looking to potentially target that draw, I would say after those 3 tough games is when you can really start to attack attacking players. You can go for like your Bradman Best, your Pongers. You can still hold your Mitch Barnetts, Connor Watsons, etc. So I think Bradman Best, especially around that period of time, could be a really good pickup at that point. With the Raiders, again, they haven't really shown tremendous form, and these games are a little bit up and down, so I don't know how much kind of investment I'd make into their team. But if you are looking to go a little bit more pod, you can go for like your Josh Hodgson, maybe your flyer at halfback with a George Williams. Jack Wyden, obviously we know that he can turn it on in real life, but he hasn't really shown that much so far yet in Supercoach wise. Jordan Rapana, if you want to go for a pod at centre, he's still posting some decent scores actually, so he could be good pickup in these slightly easier games, even though they have got some tough games mixed in there. And on the forwards, you've got like your Hudson Young, Ryan James if he gets his place back. I put Bailey Simpson here, but he hasn't really set the world alight. But yeah, hopefully we get some attacking stats from him. Probably someone I didn't have on this list as well as Ryan Sutton, who has been playing some big minutes, and we've seen that he's been able to get a couple of tries as well. So he potentially could get some decent attacking stats. And finally, with the Sea Eagles, I've got a few real relevant players. Tom Trbojevic, I think everyone is really, really excited to see him come back, and he's absolutely smashed it last week against the Titans. And the Sea Eagles have some pretty decent games in their next few, thrown in with some tougher games. But the thing with someone like Trbojevic, he's such quality, he can post big scores against anyone. Same argument, I guess, say with Ponga, even though they've got tough games coming up. I think you really can have a bit of a flip a coin with those two. The thing with Trbojevic that really works in his favour is that he's really cheap. He's 590k, so he's a lot cheaper than your Pongas, your Guthersons, your Tedescos, even your Latrell and Pappenhausen is just soaring through the roof. So he's actually kind of affordable. And if you can get Tom Trbojevic on the cheap, you must be doing something right in Supercoach. I've got Cherry Evans and Jake Trbojevic here, but to be honest, I'm not really too keen on either of these two. I think there's a lot better picks in their positions. I've got Josh Schuster, who I think is an amazing hold still at 5'8". Unfortunately, potentially I might have to trade him for Jake Simpkin, but I think I'm still leaning towards Connor Watson making way instead, because Josh Schuster, he's shown an ability to get attacking points, combined with his good base makes him a really good player in your 17, and still making a lot of cash for us. And finally, I've got Jason Saab here, who, he's able to get a couple of tries last week, but still only scored a 44, but you know what, that's better than the 5s that he was getting, so I think he's still okay to hold over this period of time. Now, you guys might have heard me kind of discuss this in some of my other videos, but kind of really wanted to start talking a little bit more about the actual buy rounds. So there are going to be 2 key buy rounds this season with State of Origin. There'll be round 13 and round 17. So the way we kind of want to target this is, if you're looking at your overall, if you focus mainly on overall rankings, you really want to try and make sure you've got enough players to cover both of these rounds to an extent, to kind of make sure you're not really slipping too far in the points. The teams that do play in round 13 will be the Broncos, the Dragons, the Eels, the Knights, the Panthers, the Storm, the Titans, and the West Tigers. So quite a few relevant teams there. So, really, I think the ideal strategy, goes without saying, is you want to target these teams that are firstly playing probably in round 13, but also have a good draw coming up. So that will be like your Dragons, your Eels, your Panthers, your Knights to an extent, your Storm, your Titans, and your West Tigers. I think they all have got that benefit of playing in round 13 plus good draws leading up to that point. So they're teams really that I think you want to be investing in. In terms of some of the players who will be playing around this period of time, again, try to put a bit of a list together similar to what I just had before, and try to flag those players that I think would be playing around that State of Origin period. So with the Broncos, maybe Payne Haas, Matt Lodge, Tessie New, although he has been dropped, Pat Carrigan. I have got Jordan Ricky here, but given that he's been benched, I think potentially you could scrap him off the list. One person you probably could add onto that list who I haven't mentioned is like a Tavita Pangai Jr. He could be a decent play because he'll play in the round 13 bye week. And the Broncos, while they don't have a great draw, he's a forward, so he can still get some decent stats and decent points, even playing in those tougher games. With the Dragons, kind of mentioned before, Zach Lomax could really benefit from this good draw coming up. Dragons do play round 13, but the problem is that he potentially might play Origin, so then he would miss out actually in that period of time. With the Eels, very similar list to what I had before. I think the key guys will be like your Isaiah Papali'is, Dylan Browns, and probably Ryan Madison, who I don't think really would probably be considered for Origin. I don't know about Madison. I can't remember if he was actually in the extended squad for the Blues, but given this kind of setback he's had with concussions, it'd be really hard to get maybe up to full match fitness by that period of time. So definitely Isaiah Papali'i and Dylan Brown could be good pickups for that round 13 bye week and benefit from that good draw coming up as well. With the Knights, I think the few guys who will probably definitely not play Origin, I would say, would be like a Jaden Brayley, a Mitch Barnett, and a Connor Watson, I think. Bradman Best has been kind of touted potentially as an Origin player, but I don't think it will happen this year. It's probably more likely to happen maybe in the next couple of years. He's still very young, so I think Bradman Best could be a great pickup. As I mentioned, I think the Knights have got a few tough games for the next 3 rounds, and he could be a good inclusion into a team from that point onwards, given that he will play round 13. With the Panthers, I'm not really going to go through the list. I kind of mentioned that already. Same with the Storm and the Titans as well. And with the Tigers, again, very similar to the list I had before. So yeah, for the rest of the teams, refer to what I mentioned previously. But yeah, one thing that is kind of that I'm noticing with this the bye weeks is that round 13 definitely has a lot of players who I think are guys you want to be keeping all season long. Like say take the Panthers for example. If you've got a Jerome Luai, if you've got a Brian To'o, Cleary, you're not going to bring these guys in for round 13 and then trade them out because they buy in round 17. These are guys I think you're going to want to be stacking into your team and keeping. You like your Zach Lomax, your Bradman Best, your David Nofoalumas. These are season-long keepers. So you could potentially, if you want to manage this period, you could stack your team for round 13 because there are some good teams playing in this bye week. So you can stack your team with Eels players like Reid Marnie, for example, although he could actually also play in State of Origin, maybe off the bench. But, there's so many good teams playing in round 13 who have very useful Supercoach players. And a lot of those are season keepers. So you could make an argument to potentially stack your team with round 13 players to get a really strong 17, maximize the points when others who maybe aren't planning so much will lose a few players and lose a few points, and you can make some good ground there. But potentially that means you have to cop a big points hit in round 17 because you'll have a lot of those guys who you want to keep for the season who won't play. We do have, I think, in round 15 or 16, a big trade week. So you get 5 trades in that round. That is a period of time when you can, trade out a lot of the guys who you've brought in just to fill in at round 13, trade them out to round 17 playing guys, and that helps better manage your team. That's the kind of strategy I guess you would use with that big trade week. So it really does kind of help incentivize, saving trades so that you can better manage for this period of time as well, and then also for the run home. So those are the teams that will play in the round 13 bye week, and that list there is a few players who will be relevant over that period of time. And so next here, what I've got is the players and the teams that will play in the round 17 bye week. So in round 17, the teams that will play will be the Bulldogs, the Cowboys, Rabbitohs, Raiders, Roosters, Sea Eagles, Sharks, and the Warriors. So that's already something I'm noticing from that list of teams. There's a couple of teams that not many people are going to be really investing in anyway. Like the Bulldogs and Cowboys aren't really getting that much interest as it is. Raiders, I think a couple of people might have their forwards, but I don't think overall there's too many players who you're getting there. Sea Eagles as well, you might be getting your Turbos and your Josh Schusters, but I think that's about it. Sharks, to be honest, maybe not. Maybe a Teague Wilton, a Siva Talakai down the line. And the Warriors, maybe like a Tohu Harrison or Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Roosters, obviously, and Rabbitohs have a lot of investment. So those are the two teams that probably a lot of people will be trying to capitalize on. But I think with those other teams, I'm getting a sense that they're probably not that Supercoach relevant in terms of the players. So this is kind of what I'm talking about, where in round 17, you might just have to kind of cop the points hit, because you're probably going to be having a team which is more filled with round 13 keepers as opposed to say round 17 keepers. But either way, I think there's still some decent players who you can pick up over this period of time who will probably be season long keepers. Like if you have a Travojevic and he's still performing, you're going to hold him into your team. But this is definitely a period of time where you can probably capitalize on some pods. So if you're looking potentially at Bulldogs players who not a lot of people won't have, one guy I've actually been pretty impressed with is like an Adam Elliott. I think he's averaging around the 60s. If Jake Averillo is improving at that point in time, you can also pick him up. And on the Cowboy side, some pods would be like your Val Holmes, Jason Taumalolo could be a pod, in come round 17. And with the Rabbitohs, they're chock full of players who you'd want to have in that round. Your Cody Walker, Latrell, Adam Reynolds, Alex Johnston, Cam Murray, Damien Cook, Dan Gagai. These are all guys who can put a shift in for you and still deliver some decent points. Roosters and Sea Eagles have kind of touched on their players. And with the Sharks, I think really what I'm kind of waiting and hoping on is Sean Johnson. You know, he was so good last year in SuperCoach. Come round 17, you know, if he's fit and firing before that, he definitely could be someone to bring in for your halfback position. You know, he definitely probably would be a pod at that point in time. And playing in round 17, you know, that's probably one guy who you would look at as a, you know, genuine halfback keeper. It all depends on how he recovers from his long-term injury though. But potentially even like a Will Kennedy, maybe a Teague Wilton if he's still relevant. You know, potentially you could bring in these guys, but I see them more as kind of fill-in and a placeholder for that round 17 as opposed to a season keeper. I think the overall strategy that I'd probably like to take as well is to try and get my team with more season-long keepers to help, you know, manage these bye rounds. So that's, say, for example, get as many season keepers that I can for like the round 13 to have a very strong team for that. And any season keepers who I'd want who do play round 17, that's ideal. But if it just so happens that there's less players I can put out in round 17 as opposed to 13, that's just kind of how it's going to be, that it's going to fall. But instead I'll make up the numbers in that big round 5 trade week in round 15 and 16. So hopefully you guys followed on from that. I was just a little bit rambling off the top of my head, just kind of my thought. But yeah, hopefully that did make some sense. But yeah, if you had any questions, do let me know in the comments of the video. That's it, guys. That's my kind of wrap up of the best draw for the round 7 to 12 period, and also a little bit of commentary on how to better plan for the Origin bye period. Obviously, as we get closer and closer to that date, we'll know a little bit more about players that might be more likely to be selected for Origin. So this is definitely something that's not set in stone, as said the strategy. You know, we know a lot can change even in a week in SuperCoach, so give it a month and a half and we'll see. You know, some teams could be performing like top 2. I might have flagged them as an easy team. But guys, if you do like this video, would really appreciate a thumbs up, and do please consider subscribing. My goal is to get to 1,000 by the Origin period, so let's see if I can get there by game 1. But until then, see you guys in the next video.